Hello and welcome back to the Witch Source. We are here for part 2, the Divine Feminine. And so just like with the Divine Masculine, I want to start again with following up from the Wheel of the Year. This time the Goddess, one of the very many Goddess Mythos. And this one is of the Lunar Goddess. Is where we looked at the Divine Masculine, we looked at the Sun God, right? And so this is looking at the Lunar Goddess and her cycle. So I wanted to share that myth. Again, this is just one of many. It's my favorite version. Also from Raven Gramasi, Witchcraft, a Mystery Tradition, his book. So here we go. Again, my words, not his. Basically, it's my take of the story that he shared. So, yeah. All right. So with this one, with the Sun God, we started at Yule, winter solstice, right? Because it was his birth. This one, we actually began in the underworld, the place of darkness at Samhain, which I think you traditionally see a lot of pagans and witches celebrate Samhain as the new year for them. And that's where we're starting, at the new year in the darkness at Samhain. So this is also compared to the cauldron and the dark moon. So this is starting at the dark moon, the new moon, as some people would say, so the beginning of the moon cycle. Again, the Lunar Goddess. So we're starting at the new moon compared to the cauldron, and it's the place of creation and procreation. And this is where, at this point, the goddess is, she's carrying within her new life. So at this point, where we're picking up or starting the story, she is pregnant at this point. So that's where we get that creation, procreation. And, we also see that too in the lunar cycle, because when we move forward from the new moon, it starts to get full again. It's waxing, right? And so it's getting full, where we have moving through creation, where we are doing our manifesting and that kind of thing. So it makes sense. But yeah, so that's where we start at Samhain. She's in the beginning phases of pregnancy. And then she's in that darkness moving through. And then the goddess of the moon gives birth to the sun god at Yule, winter solstice. And she is gifting the world with hope. Again, the child of promise. And the world celebrates with gift giving, the lighting of candles, and the hearth fire to stay warm and have that light on the longest night of the year when he's born. So this is obviously her mother aspect that we see a lot of times in that triple goddess. We see that a lot, the maiden mother crone. So this is her mother aspect where we're starting off. And then the goddess makes her way through her rite of passage at Imbolc, where she is the divine light. And we see her wearing a crown of candles, or the crescent moon, and she's lighting that way in the darkness. And then at the spring equinox, she rises up from the underworld into the other world as the maiden. And she brings with her, this is like, where we see it spring. She brings with her vitality, life, renewal. We start to see green coming back, blossoming. Sometimes you see like little babies being born and animals. And so she is coming out, she's rising out of that underworld where she's been and bringing with her life. And then she becomes the Queen of May at Beltane. And this is where the sun god courts her. And then they wed at the summer solstice. So So then at Lammas, the moon goddess is pregnant again. But this time she is giving birth to the harvest, where he has, impregnated her the first time so as to bring the harvest to the world, so that we have the ability to, again, bring life and save and prepare for the dark that's coming. And so she's the mother who gives life to all things, and also the material. This is where she's really giving birth to material things. At the autumn equinox, the goddess begins her descent, following her sun god after his sacrificial death into the underworld. So this is where she goes back down in the underworld, and she seeks her desire, the light, her other half. And then at Samhain, she finds him. And so this is really showing to you that, again, the moon's always there, but we only see it because his light is shined. The sun is shining the light on the moon, and the moon is reflecting that light back to us. So when he is there in her presence, she is shining, she is bright. But when that light is taken away or blocked, she doesn't shine. So this is really showing how, in that aspect, she's following him, right? Like, she goes through more cycles in the wheel of the year. There's 13 moons. So as we go through the wheel of the year, she cycles a lot more often than him. So she's constantly going through these different changes and phases. But if we were to separate those out and kind of look at them in each quarter and start to compare them to his, it makes a little bit more sense. So right now she was moving from the full moon to the waning moon. And so here at Samhain, she's in the darkness, seeking that light so she can shine again. And she finds him and takes into herself his light. And so we start the cycle back over, where she becomes pregnant and stays in the darkness until she gives birth to the sun god again at the winter solstice, this time giving birth to the spiritual, where the first birth was really giving birth to the material. So I like this because, again, like we talked about in the last episode, it shows more of a balance. It shows where he doesn't just seek her out, she seeks him out. She's seeking that light. She's seeking that guidance. She's seeking that direction. And I think that goes back to also where we talked about the divine masculine being more of that logical aspect. And here she's very much emotional, right? She is emotionally being driven to seek him out because she misses that. She misses him. She misses her other half and her light. And so I think it just gives us a different way of looking at the mythos. She's also being that mother, not only through giving birth, but also through providing the material, providing the harvest. She could not produce the harvest without his seed, obviously. We see that in all of nature. So both are needed, right? But he wouldn't be able to be the father of abundance without her either.
Correct.
It takes both sides here. And that's the main thing that we're hoping everybody is grasping from these two episodes, is finding the balance and understanding that we have both the masculine and the feminine aspects within.
And the need for both. The need for both.
Right. You need to have both. They are both okay. You want to have the balance. So there's a couple things. The first thing I want to mention, we see a lot of times especially where the goddess is concerned, we see, the three phases, the maiden, mother, crone. And I mean, it makes sense in a very basic way of looking at it, right? But women really are so much more than just these like girls running around that then are going to be mothers and then just be wise old ladies. Like, fuck that. Like, they do so much more. Which I think another reason I like this is that we see that where she's the one that is giving birth to the material. She's the one that's giving birth and providing. She's the one that's nurturing. And really, when we look at like the harvest and the fruits of the labor, right, and the what comes of that, it really took both of them nurturing to have this.
Yes.
That feminine aspect of nurturing, right? And so part of being able to nurture is to receive. If she wasn't receptive, she would not be able to then provide. And so that's looking at more of the feminine aspects. And so that's one thing that we have to keep in mind, like whether you're a man or a woman, being receptive, being open, taking things that are offered, while it might be a feminine quality, you need it to be able to provide for those around you and to provide for yourself. So I know like a lot of times, I think it's hard for men to receive help,
Oh yeah.
to
Oh
go
yeah.
to that receptive place.
Well, and so it's hard to ask for one. Um, it is very hard to ask for help, uh, for men, uh, or anybody who dwells in the masculine.
Right,
Um, it's even harder to receive it without having asked.
right,
Um, so it to take for instance, if if you go to a supermarket of some kind, general store, you may see a guy trying to load a like TV stand or something ridiculously heavy.
right.
And somebody walks over to them and says, "Hey, let me give you a hand with that." And just immediately starts to reach down to help. They're going to be like, "Oh, no, 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 I got it. It's fine. It's fine. I got it."
Knowing they don't got it.
Yeah. Well, no, I can also straight up say, "No, we believe we've got it." Right up until we hurt ourselves.
Right.
Um, which again, that on the more minimal side of toxic masculinity, but that's kind of what that is.
Yeah.
But it for those that are really in that masculine trait, it's very much a no, I got this. I don't need help. Period. I'm the one that's supposed to be helping. Um, but when you're a lot more open to receiving that help, well, you find you can do a lot more.
Yes. And
Uh,
it's so much easier.
so much easier. Um, but yeah, that's where we get to tap into the feminine, more receptive side of things, is being able to accept that sometimes we can't do it on our own,
Right.
um, and that we do need that help.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with it.
N- Not at all.
That's
Not at all.
finding that balance and saying, you know what? Yeah, I would really love some help. That would really save my back.
Literally.
Right.
Um,
So I think definitely, that's seen as a feminine quality. And, women we talked about men and women both a lot in the divine masculine, but I think sometimes we forget that women and the goddess especially um, lives in both and has both the masculine and feminine qualities, and I think sets an example um, for us very much so. I don't know how much of the the god mythos out there actually set a good example of being balanced within both energies. I don't know.
Um, well, okay, so I'm not extremely well versed in
I'm not.
God
Not.
mythos. Of course, we also look at neo paganism. Okay, that is pretty much what everybody practices these days. Yes, we do have old traditions and so on and so forth that come from many centuries back. But paganism, as it is now, did not get started really in the way that it is now until um, Wicca and Alexandrian Gardnerian Wicca was actually really brought forth and books were produced. And so we now end up having what we call neo paganism or modern paganism. Um, and a lot of these stories have been lost. But if you look at gods such as Dionysus um, and everything that Dionysus represents, he is pretty much a party god, but at the same time, he is inviting people in and, you know, looking for the joy of companionship
Right.
um, versus someone like Ares, who's very much more go to war, put that aggression out there, be very straightforward, and take on your opponents head on. Um, so they are out there. I know that they are. I need to do more research into them as I fully plan on doing. But as a matter of fact, I don't know if I've gotten any of it written down. Oh, that's the wrong way in the book. Um, you could even say that Cernunnos, the horned god, um,
Mhm.
is actually a lot more balanced in both masculinity and femininity, um,
I could see
because
that.
of the traits that he has
Right.
or that he actually represents. So he is a god of nature, fertility, abundance, um, and the cycle of nature.
Right.
So he's actually all about balance, which if he is all about balance, then he has to have the balance of both.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, there. I know there's a lot out there that do have it. It's just I'm not well versed enough in it to give too many examples.
Well, and I know like with the goddesses, there's there's many, and many of them are pretty feminine, and they pretty much for the most part stay in that wheelhouse. I mean, they do have some of the masculine qualities, but then you have some that are extremely masculine.
Hmm.
Um, and I think they are good examples of where female figures can fall into maybe a little bit of that toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think a lot of them show a balance of both the feminine and masculine qualities within. Um,
I was about to say good representation of toxic masculinity within a goddess. And I hate to talk bad about her, but Aphrodite, um, very much jealous. And so part of that actually comes from the emotional side of things.
I wonder if would
But
that be more of a toxic feminine trait?
So that part is, but it's her planning things out to do to people and giving that more aggressive nature and that more
When it turns from emotional to aggression,
like, well, you
it's still emotionally aggressive.
yes, there's still emotionally aggressive, but I'm talking
Taking
about
action.
like, yeah, taking that action or
Yeah.
you know, plotting it out. Very
The
much
plan.
taking the time and thinking about
Logically thinking it through.
exactly
And then
how to
taking.
make this the worst possible thing ever.
Yeah. I
Um,
guess that does make sense.
I love Aphrodite to death. I work personally with Aphrodite, but yeah, no, she can. Whew, she'll mess you up, and she'll mess you up big time. And she doesn't play. Like that's the big thing. So there's, uh, oh, she has mythos of getting angry just because someone has been called more beautiful than she is, and then taking revenge on her. Athena has the same sort of thing, um, but it was her temple was desecrated, and I believe that's how Medusa was created. So yeah, we definitely see a lot more of that potential toxic masculinity within the goddesses as well, just for the simple fact of like, well, it's triggered by emotion, but then turns into thinking, what is the worst possible way that I can get back at this person for whatever reason?
So it's a good example of a female figure expressing toxic masculinity.
Correct.
I mean, I guess that definitely makes sense. Um, and I think you see that a lot, especially like we talked about in the divine masculinity, like the protective nature, protection being a masculine quality, but yet like almost every mother has that extremely protective nature and will fuck you up if you mess with their child. Like that's a pretty masculine trait expressing within the feminine.
Yes.
Um, and then, yeah, it could definitely become very uh,
Well,
to the point of toxic masculinity if they are physically taking action and being very aggressive towards the person that's hurting their child. Like it does fall along those lines. And that's the funny thing, like, toxic masculinity is labeled as very negative in today's society, but then there are times when it's praised. Like a mother protecting their child, it's okay. A father protecting their child, it's okay. Um, Sometimes it's like seen, um, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just giving examples, but like we see the military, right? Like doing some pretty overall heinous things, but it's in the name of freedom or peace or protecting your country and things like that. And so it's seen as okay. And
I was about to
um,
say this is not the podcast to get into details.
right, no, absolutely not. Like, and
'Cause I mean,
don't get me wrong, like I come from a military family, so I have, full respect for military and all of that, right or wrong, all aside. Like, these whether they're being overly masculine or falling into that line of toxic masculine, they still are choosing to lay down their lives for what they believe in. So,
right,
um,
it's one of those. For me, it's one of those like thought processes of they have the right to do this. For one, you have to think about the age of most of the people in the military.
I
You
thought we
can
weren't getting
join.
into details.
Well, I'm not getting into details on like the things that have happened, but the age range on most of
It's
your
pretty wide still. There's a lot of youngins going in still.
well, see, and that's the thing. There's a lot more young people that serve in the military, but they only serve for a short period of time.
Yeah, I
Those
do
that
think you see more of that.
those that are older in the military have served many years already. But even still, like you get to if you go into the military at the age of 18 and you serve until you're 40, you've done 22 years. Whereas most kids go in at 17, 18 years old, 19 years old, serve 4 years and they're done because of what they experience in the military. And again, I fully support our troops in everything that they go through. I have nothing but respect for them. But like you think about what they go through overseas, especially our infantrymen, our Marines, our cavalrymen in the Army, they go through some stuff. They get put in really, really, really bad situations. And so, yeah, you can kind of understand the toxic masculinity coming out on that. But I feel like one of the things that we also need to do is give them the support necessary so that when they come home, they can be nurtured and taken care of and they can experience the the feminine side of things and try and cope with anything that they may have gone through. Um, because again, they've been in this super masculine situation the entire time because that's pretty much what it is. That they're never given the opportunity to cope and they're never given the opportunity to just understand and get into their emotions and really feel their emotions in a lot of cases.
So, on that point, I don't even remember what my whole point of
So,
was bringing the military up.
sorry, I went
Um,
on a tangent.
totally has left me now. There was a whole reason, a point that I was going there, and I do not even freaking remember. Oh,
I know it was about the talk. We were talking about that. We see a lot of it, the toxic masculine side in when it comes to our military men and the actions that they take, which
no,
let,
that wasn't it at all.
let
That wasn't it at all.
well, no,
Oh, the
that's
whole thing was sometimes toxic masculinity is seen as okay. There's like a pass on it. Example, a mother protecting her child. Um, and then, then there's times where it's in a different extreme where it's not seen as okay. And I think it was just an interesting like sidebar to interesting thing to think about. And so on that note, like, are there times, well, I guess before we go there, like what I am totally just thrown for a loop right now. I'm struggling. I'm probably gonna just cut a lot of this out because my whole brain is just
it's
much
my
of
bad.
much.
I went on that tangent because again, so I have to ask about like we. So you said we see a lot of it as being okay.
Yeah, but there was like a sidebar before that that brought me to that I was gonna loop back around to.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where we were at before that.
Women expressing like goddesses showing the balance of having both masculine and feminine traits and expressing the divine feminine and masculine. Um, and I think the whole point was that a lot of times women expressing their divine masculinity is seen as more okay than men expressing it. And I guess it's just because the way it comes out. Um, not that it's a positive thing, but I think they get a little bit more of a pass just simply because they're not a man. And I think that's pretty typical in today's society and day and age, just the way things seem to come down the pike. So moving on. Other qualities of the divine feminine. Obviously being receptive, providing nurturing. I think nurturing is a big one. And we talked about in the last one, like that can be seen in both men and women. That nurturing side, which is more of on the along the lines of the divine feminine aspects. But also just this general like care and concern and feeling the need to take care of people, feeling the need to provide for people, and not in a less, I want to say less active way, but a less out in the world type of way where, the divine masculine is more going out and doing. I feel like the divine feminine is more of a going within and doing, or going, not being as seen. I feel like the divine masculine is very much about being seen, like, hey, look what I'm doing. Look what I did. I did this, or I did this for you. And like, look what I can do. And I feel like again, like both men and women express this trait at different times, but the divine feminine to me feels more about doing the things that people don't see, doing the things that people don't notice, doing the things that don't get as much notoriety. Like how many times does somebody say thank you to someone just for cleaning the house, or doing the dishes, or doing the laundry? Like, how many times has somebody thanked or even praised, right, for doing that kind of thing? Where a lot of the big feats that, you see some people do, it's like, oh, thank you for doing this. And, I'm so proud of you. And you did such a good job, right?
One of the things that I do try and do personally is anytime my wife actually, you know, does laundry,
That
and
sounds
it's not
terrible.
it's well no
That
no
already sounds
no
terrible when she actually, sorry,
well
go ahead. I'm just
okay,
messing.
whenever you go into the understanding of the situation, I'm a stay-at-home dad technically. Um and so she's working, she's the breadwinner, she's the one in the more quote unquote masculine uh station within the home. Um so she goes out, she makes the money, she does the hard work, so on and so forth. I'm the one that's staying home, taking care of my daughter, doing dishes and laundry and trying to keep the house clean and so on and so forth.
It's a big
Um,
job.
yeah, uh, especially with three dogs and three cats and a 3-year old. Um,
It's a threes there.
so it's one of those things of like if she ends up doing the laundry, I do try to make sure to say thank you. Or anytime that she does dishes, I try to say thank you. But also in return, she thanks me for doing it,
Right.
even though that's kind of like expected in a way. It's
Well,
one of
that's
those
the
things.
thing. That's the thing. Like, I feel like oftentimes it doesn't matter if it's the man or woman doing it. It's just those things that often go unnoticed, unappreciated. Um, and they are things that are typically, obviously not always, but typically done by the feminine. I mean, or even a lot of times you see it just in people that express their feminine side more.
Yes.
It's something, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying people that are more in touch, I feel like, and I've noticed, with their feminine are more willing to do those type of things, or want to do those type of things, because it's their way of nurturing, providing, and caring for their home, their family, those they love. So I definitely feel like those things are feminine traits. It's just that less showy side, right? It's that darker in the shadows where I feel like the goddess definitely spends a lot more time in the darkness um, than the god does. I mean, I mean, really, even just looking at the Will of the Year mythos, right? Like, he's not even in the underworld for that long.
Yeah.
Let's be serious. And in the ones that I shared, she's down there with him.
Hmm.
So, and she stays in the darkness even after he's born. She stays in the darkness. And then, even as, she, especially the lunar goddess, as she cycles through the year and those 13 moons, she spends so much time in the darkness. And I think that's where we pick up some of these qualities of not being seen, staying in the background, being that support from behind. Um, and again, I'm not saying there's anything negative or wrong about that. It's just, I think, qualities of the feminine and that divine feminine of wanting to love and care, support, and nourish from the shadows.
Yeah.
Um, and just not having necessarily that need for that flashy recognition. It's just, it's done out of love um, and care. And I feel like, and I'm not saying that men and the masculine don't love and care. I just feel like they're a lot more showy about it because, again, the qualities of action and
Yep.
being seen. And while, yes, the goddess and the feminine, it's still taking action and a lot of action. And as you know, it's often very taxing and exhausting physically, mentally, emotionally. um, it's still done in the shadows. It's done a lot of times without complaint, without demanding something in return. And I think that's just part of that quality of the divine feminine. I mean, even as we look in the mythos, like the goddess has her moment in the light, right? Like even when she gives birth to the sun god at the winter solstice, it's still not about her.
Right.
Like
It.
the spotlight is stolen. It's not about her. Like she just went through this whole labor, this whole thing, and nobody cares because it's all about him. Like, and I'm not, it's not even about that. It's just like, again, doing this thing in the shadow, in the dark, and it kind of being a thankless job. Um, but would she ever not do it? No, she would do it
Oh yeah.
every time without question.
Well, and look at the romances. Look at the romances between masculine and feminine. When a man is trying to woo a woman, it's usually very large and extravagant actions. They're a lot more direct. Um,
We,
whereas whereas when a woman is actually trying to get the attention of a man, it's more subtle. It's more under the radar. It's that quiet flirting. Um, and occasional quips here and there just to kind of catch the attention.
right.
Um, then whenever you get into relationships, it's you know let's even go as far as like when a man does a proposal, that is a huge thing.
Right.
Um, like when it's almost like there's an expectation
Yeah.
of it to be big,
And
but
yeah,
like
and there's some pressure associated with it. And obviously it varies by person to person, but yeah,
but
I
it's
definitely
also
think it's the expectation and the pressure can be there for a lot of people.
yeah, and so one of the things that we don't hear a whole lot about that does happen is when a woman proposes,
Yeah.
because it 100% happens.
Yeah.
Um, But again, it's not made out to be this huge, extravagant thing most of the time. It, in a lot of cases, it's more secluded, more quiet, more one on one, more intimate,
Right.
and we start seeing the the different ways that each type love.
Right.
Um, I'm gonna stop on that because I will run onto a whole other tangent.
Okay. Yeah, let's not. So going back to the goddess, like she has her moment in the sun. Obviously, it's not when she gives birth. Um, but she has her moment at Imbolc where she's wearing that crown of candles, um, she or the crescent moon, and she's bringing the light back. And then we see at the spring equinox where she's honored with bringing life back into the world. That's really it's really kind of her time to shine is when we look to her at spring to like, please bring back the green stuff. Like, please make the sun god shine and bring back the warmth. Like, beckon him forward. Like, make this happen. And um, so she kind of has her moment in the sun there. And then, as he is seeking her out from spring until Beltane, um, I feel like it's also really about her. Like that's her moment is spring, and moving in the direction towards spring. Like that's her moment. And then I kind of feel like after that, it's all right back to um, the sun god. Like
It is.
yay, he's here. The warmth is here. The having fun is here. The long days are here, um, and he kind of stays in the spotlight until they both disappear and go to the underworld. Um, so
If
yeah,
you
she does really spend a lot of time in the shadows, and I think that's just a more feminine aspect. But like we talked about before, like even men need their time to go into the shadows to get that nurturing, to have that self-care, to um, recoup, just like the sun god did, like and reset themselves before they have to come out and shine again
if
and keep pushing.
if you if you look at it, there's almost an equal balance. But again, the goddess goes unnoticed most of the time, and the god is usually celebrated in the will of the year.
Right.
The solar is more celebrated than the moon, but it is almost more equally balanced, especially in Grimasi's version of this of these stories. Because again, if you look at the moon and going to the underworld again, you start right there around Samhain to Yule.
Right.
Um, she gets her time almost all the way leading up to Beltane. And then at Beltane, they join, and now the sun has his time. So technically, power really begins to shift more towards the solar right around Astara, because that would be your equinoxes,
Right.
Samhain and Astara. Um, but again, like they start sharing the spotlight up until Beltane, and then at Beltane, the sun god really gets to shine bright, and again, you move all the way to Samhain before the light's snuffed out, and we're more focused on the the moon. So it was just something that hit me. Again, you find that balance even
Right.
still within the
Well,
cycles.
another thing that's interesting, obviously, so we talk about how um, the moon couldn't shine without the sun, right? Like because the moon is reflecting that light back. Um, But at the same time, when we look at the wheel of the year, the sun god could not exist without her. He could not exist without the goddess because he wouldn't be able to be reborn.
Hmm.
But what I think is interesting to note in both of these, the goddess never dies.
Yep, that was one of the things that I noted.
She
Very,
never dies. She goes and passes into the underworld, but she doesn't die because that's when she becomes pregnant as well in the underworld.
hmm.
So obviously, she's still very alive, still very active, very fertile, and able to create, make, do, procreate. It's just all in the darkness, it's all in the shadows. And again, so we have that aspect of um, creation and making things and doing things. It's just in the shadow aspects. And I feel like that is also the divine feminine aspect of it. Um, and I think it's just an interesting way to think about it. And the fact that while she may not have a whole lot of time in the spotlight, there would be no existence without her. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think it's also fascinating too, because when you look at a lot of the major religions in the world, right? They're so focused on the god. Some of them have even erased the goddess completely, which she did exist in at one point, but she was taken out completely. And yet, this god, whether it's um, this new savior or whatever, right? Like they have to be born. They have to be born. They have to come from somewhere. All of this had to be born. All of earth and nature and cycles had to be born. And who is the one that birth? Who births things?
That the it's the mother, it's the goddess. It's
Right. So it's just crazy to me that so many of these religions like are so focused on the god and completely eliminate the goddess who never dies, and yet nothing would exist without her. So it's, and I think it just goes to show, honestly, the point is, without the feminine, I don't think any of us could exist.
oh no,
You
with
have to have the feminine. You cannot ignore it. And I think it's been they've, for whatever reason, the world has tried to push the feminine aside for so long, and we've seen kind of where that gets us. And I think right now there's such a huge push the feminine forward. Um, and the downside to that is people want to push the masculine to the back to make it happen.
oh yeah,
And it just doesn't work that way. Like, if you look at the Wheel of the Year, if you look at the different mythos, like, yes, they're heavily influenced by human writers, obviously, but that all have their own personal agendas. Like, all of that aside, um, you really can't have one without the other. The goddess can't shine without the god. The god really can't do much without the goddess. He can't continue to exist without the goddess. So they go hand in hand. You have to find the balance, and there has to be that balance. And I feel like if we were to focus less on trying to push one forward and push another back, and just focus more on trying to find the balance of those traits within each of ourselves, and then try to help push that out into society in a better balance, I think we would land a little bit more in the middle on that spectrum.
oh yeah. Well, and again, this all goes with the ebb and flow of the universe. Um, you know, what is it? The law to every action there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Right.
Um, so there's been this push, this major push on masculinity for so long, and men in power, men up front, that now that there is a push back, this is the equal and opposite reaction
Right.
that is now going to try and push that masculine away. It's going to try and push it to the point where it's not noticed, it's not being brought to the forefront. Um, and instead it's overly empowering the feminine and doing more based off of emotional reaction.
Right.
um, and again, it could eventually even itself out, as long
Hopefully.
as it's yeah,
That's
as long as it's more of a equal give and take,
right.
instead of those balls that just kind of keep knocking each other
Right.
back and forth. um, it's okay to have this push so that we understand where the feminine is. I fully agree with that. But again, we've got to find that balance. Um,
I really hope that we can find the balance. But, looking at some of the more feminine traits, obviously, it's working with emotions, digging into um, those aspects. I mean, we've covered a few, like working in the shadows, like not needing as much notoriety and recognition, is more of like a feminine quality, nurturing, caring, providing, um, and doing it all out of love. And it's kind of that being that, selfless act, and not necessarily seeking that recognition or that appreciation. Um, so if we were to, we were there for a hot minute, but if we were to go back into um, toxic feminine, like how would that express? What would that look like? Right. Um, and I think that's really where you get into um, I think that expresses itself when women get pushed too far or they do too much, kind of like how we talk about men do, right? And then they get overloaded and they snap and they get aggressive or short tempered, things like that. I think the same thing is true for the divine feminine when it gets pushed to an extreme and it starts to express in a toxic way of things like resentment, like emotional things, right? Like resentment, jealousy, um, anger, hate. I feel like they're in that emotional realm, and those are things that start to slip into the toxic side of femininity. And especially when women are working in that shadow, where we've seen, like, even historically, we talked about before, like women work in that shadow and they do it for so long. Um, and there isn't the recognition, or there isn't the appreciation, or there isn't the balance of taking that time out for that self-love, that nurturing, that care, to say, I need a break. um, they start to get bitter, and they start to get angry, and they start to get resentful, and um, they start to get pretty nasty, and then you get a lot of the passive aggressive, right? And I feel like that's definitely a much more um, toxic feminine trait.
I also have to say that there's a flip side to that. When you receive too much attention, when you
Mhm.
receive too much of, let me do this for you, um, and you're just allowing people to do for you without ever having to do for yourself, and you get spoiled,
Right. Yeah.
and then you develop greed, and you develop, you know covetousness, um, and you think that the world revolves around you and that everyone should do for you instead of you actually having to put in the effort. Um, and
Yeah.
you see this a lot in men and women,
Mhm.
um, to where they have been spoiled their entire life,
Yep.
um, and now they think that they're just entitled
Yes. Yeah.
to greatness instead of having to work for it. Um, and unfortunately, that comes out in a very big way.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be direct. It's the expectation of something, and then when it doesn't happen, a full-blown meltdown.
Right. Yeah, and going along the lines of looking at this and thinking about it, right? Like going along the lines of how the feminine is often much more seen as in the show or going within those kinds of things. I think that's where you also start to see maybe some of the toxic feminine traits as that um, going within, like you said, and like the meltdowns, but more of like mental breakdowns and um, mental health problems, self hate, self loathing. And of course, from that comes things like depression and all those things that go inward that we then push in and in and in and in, and we cover up and we pretend don't exist. We push all these things in the shadows, um, and we don't ever let them out into the light, right? Because a lot of times we see this toxic masculinity of big shows of aggression, right? Like that's a lot of it, whether it's
Mm.
sexually aggressive, physically aggressive, mentally aggressive, and um, controlling, or all those kinds of things. I feel like if we were to look at the opposite end of that, it would be internalizing everything, not having that outward expression, but bringing everything in
Yep.
and basically imploding on yourself. Um, and I think that's where we run into a lot of mental health issues as well.
Oh, it absolutely is. And looking at the internalizing, uh, it's supposedly seen as a toxic masculine trait to internalize your emotions instead of expressing them. Um, but I feel like it's actually very much it could be a toxic feminine, um, because again, without it being able to express it, then you're just causing, I wouldn't say irreparable damage,
right,
but you're causing a lot of damage to yourself.
right,
And again, this is the way that you end up beating yourself down and
right.
draining yourself when you're too focused on your feminine. Um,
Well, I
and
mean, it would make sense, right? Like if healthy masculinity is taking action, being productive, and um, getting things done, and you know, those are all like healthy masculine traits. But when they turn into the toxic level is when it's taken to the extreme. And the flip side of that being the feminine side being expressing your emotions, being in touch with your emotions, right? If that's a healthy um, feminine state, right,
mhm,
or feminine qualities, being able to receive and being in touch with your emotions. Again, rather than and possibly I could see like over expressing those things being a form of the toxic feminine, but definitely I feel like under expressing that is a toxic feminine. Just like I feel like for the masculine side, even like if that action is healthy masculinity, aggression being the toxic level, wouldn't underdoing be toxic, like the other end of the spectrum of the toxic masculinity of like being lethargic, not being able to take action, like because you've turned it all inward, um,
So
turned it off. I feel like that would also be a form of some kind
it,
of toxic masculinity.
yeah, I
A
mean,
deficiency. Maybe it's a masculinity deficiency,
yeah, it's
or
masculine deficiency. Um,
and we're like not expressing the emotions and shoving them down. Um, the
would be
same,
feminine deficiency.
right, would be
So
the feminine deficiency.
again, this is also where you see, again, if we classify it more as like toxic masculine to suppress your emotion, then to be quote unquote lethargic, or not be in that state of do,
Right.
um, then technically that's also a that would be a toxic feminine. But again, it would be seen as such in men who refuse to do.
Right. I mean, and that's like if we're looking at gender, but if we take gender out of it, I think it's a better way, especially if helping people diagnose themselves of,
Mm.
are you toxic masculine? Are you healthy masculine? Are you masculine deficient? Are you toxic feminine, healthy feminine, or feminine deficient? I think it would be a better way of helping people figure out where they're maybe lacking in an energy, where or overexpressing in an energy, and then help them find the balance. Like I know for me, sometimes I feel an inability to take as much action as I would like. And I feel like part of that comes from having confusion around it, right? So again, not having the masculine quality of the intellectual to be able to think it through or figure out all the details. Um, so the inability to take action and the confusion around it, like the inability to get a clear plan around something, I feel is like rather than being a feminine problem, I feel like it's a masculine deficiency
Yeah.
where I
Um,
need more masculine energy to bring back that clear thinking to be able to take action and create the balance.
so one of the things that I actually found that I didn't discuss in either in the masculine episode is kind of what masculine and feminine are and how they view things. And so with the masculine aspect, um, we actually have a tendency to focus on individual pieces of a thing instead of the whole picture.
So the feminine side would be looking at the whole picture.
Right. So and so the feminine side actually tries to look at the whole picture instead of the individual parts. And this is actually how we end up working together. Um, a man may not, or in a person in their masculinity may not recognize the whole picture beforehand, but they will recognize the parts and pieces that aren't working that need to be fixed.
Right.
But, someone in their femininity would be able to recognize the whole picture or see the whole construct,
Right.
but not necessarily know which parts and pieces aren't working or that need attention, so on and so forth. So, by combining and balancing out your masculine and your feminine, you can learn to see the whole thing
Right.
and pinpoint the pieces. In your instance, it would be you see this needs to be done. All of this needs to be done.
Right. Or I have like a full picture, like the whole picture idea of what I want to accomplish, but then the struggle, and this is not all the time, but I'm just saying, like, here recently the struggle has been figuring out the details and then being able to take action on the details. So
Yes.
definitely for me at this moment in time. It's a masculine deficiency. Um, and I also feel like to some degree, part of that has come from like trying to get maybe too in touch with the feminine side. Although I don't know if that's entirely true either.
I think it's nature.
Yeah. Oh, well, we all go through cycles. That's the whole thing too. Like you
Yeah.
have to be gentle with yourself and understanding where you're at in your life, what you're experiencing, what your cycle is, where you're at. Like it's all about the cycles, right? And so sometimes and we look at that too in the overall wheel of the year when we look at the seasons, right? Like winter time is typically about going inward, introspection, going into the shadows. It's more of that feminine time. You might be expressing more of those feminine qualities, from like fall to spring and like, in various varying degrees. And then the flip side being you're more active and doing from spring to fall, and it's those more masculine quality.
Well, and it's
A
also,
lot of people I feel like are in that cycle. Not everybody, obviously. Some people are in the reverse or
oh
some
yeah,
variation of.
but it's also in the cycle of the moon itself.
Right.
So again, when it's in that new moon phase, that's the introspective
Yeah.
as it begins to go into the waxing crescent all the way up to the full moon. This is again where you're coming out of that, you're getting into the more expressive side of things, and then
Right. You're taking
once
more action and doing more things coming up to the full moon. And then, like,
once it hits the full moon and begins to wane, you start moving back inward.
right.
And
Letting it go, letting it happen, finishing up small things that need to be done. And then sitting and waiting and seeing in the and introspective, like, how did it go?
how did it go? What's next?
Right, right, right. Yeah, definitely. So we see it in the wheel of a year as a whole, and then also in those moon phases and those cycles, um, and in varying degrees, right? Like so, while you might be going through that moon cycle during the summertime, it might be a more active moon cycle, even though you're taking the moments at the new moon to like pause. You might be still getting a whole lot more done outwardly with those moon cycles, and then getting a lot more done inwardly with the moon cycles during those winter seasons, doing that internal work, your shadow work, your healing work, forgiveness work, those kinds of things. And then, you know, in the more summertime seasons, the sunny side of the wheel of the year, you're taking more actions, which makes sense. I mean, it goes along with the whole like planting the seeds and then harvesting and making time to be able to go inward during the winter time. And
Oh yeah.
it all goes back to nature. And I think the more that we are gentle with ourselves, we recognize these things, we go with the cycles, but also I feel like we can add in where it's been the different cycles, like we can add in these concepts of the masculine and the feminine and where we over or under expressing and where can we pull in more qualities that we may need to help us balance out as we go through these cycles.
Yep.
So
100% agree on that. And again, it is all about balance.
yeah,
It's all about balancing it out. So
it also makes me curious too, like, history is always written by the winners, right? Like the conquering nations are the one that right what happened. um and we had this huge push for the patriarchy, right? That happened. um It makes me wonder what the world was like prior to that happening. Were we very feminine heavy? Was the goddess a much more revered, worshipped figure, and men were suppressed and they were finally like, we've had enough. Like, we're flipping the script completely. I
I
don't know. It's something, it's just a question that I have throughout. It came up during these conversations. Like,
I mean, I have a theory. I have a theory. And the theory is that the world was a lot more balanced, but this would be like quote unquote near the beginning of time as we know it. Um and it was a lot more balanced. We knew, you know, of the gods and goddesses. They presented themselves to us. They, basically created us in their image kind of thing. And we're like, go, be, do. We're here to help. But then potentially the god may have begun to mingle a little too much and push for certain ways. And the goddess just kind of was like, mm-hmm, why? To the point where it gets to, well, now they've seen the gods so much, so often, that we now only know the god because the goddess has sat back and just kind of allowed things to happen and worked from the shadows, but was still worshipped, so on and so forth. And then you see the progression. I feel like we will eventually get back to that because it's all a cycle.
right. So that's your theory?
That is my theory. That is
The goddess was kind of like, okay, dude, I hear you. I see you. You don't want to listen. You want to go do. So I'm going to sit back here and let you go mess up the world. And then I'm going to have to come in and fix it.
exactly. How many women
Oh, all the
or
time.
or how many feminine people that are more in their femininity
See the big picture.
look at their masculine counterpart and just like, uh-huh, go ahead. Watch what happens.
Watch you trip and fall. I done told you about that cord laying there 4 or 5 times, but you didn't want to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to watch this damn fall happen.
And any parent,
And I'm going to laugh, and then I'm going to help pick your ass up.
there's a lot of parents that
Yeah.
they're protective of their children, but at the same time, if you know it's not going to hurt them that bad, go right ahead. Watch what happens.
Yeah. Gotta let them learn.
Yep,
Or you got tired of repeating yourself because they didn't want to listen. So,
yep.
okay.
I've told you 20 billion times. I've even explained why, but you
I think it's
obviously
more.
need to learn the hard way.
I think it's probably more of that. I feel like the God and
Most
Goddess are just like, we've told them and told them and told them, and they don't want to listen. So I'm just gonna wait, watch this happen. Then we'll have to come pick up the pieces when they're done making a mess.
I
So,
mean, it's well, then again, going into the masculine feminine side of things, the mother is the nurturer, the feminine is the more nurturing side, the masculine is more the disciplinary, but then you get into the aspect of nah, we've already done this too many times.
right,
Learn it yourself, just
right.
as you were saying. So like I feel like that's literally what happened. We we
So
had that balance, we just kind of moved in there. The the god kept going around. Goddess was like, I'm just gonna sit back here and watch. Just
yeah.
you go handle it,
Oh
or
man,
something along those lines.
it's funny to think about. At the same time, though, like at the end of the masculine, I asked people to do a little introspective thought if they have trouble connecting with a God aspect of like what would just the ideal um, God be to them? What qualities would they have? What would they do? And I know a lot of people have a hard time connecting with a goddess as well, whether it's religious, cultural, what have you, the way they were raised, the religion they're part of. Like, it's hard for some people to connect with this idea or concept of a goddess. And so, again, working up into our working with the gods and goddesses episode, I would say think about what would your ideal goddess be like? What qualities would she have? What would she do? That kind of thing. And think about that because, a lot of people think of the goddess, again, going back to the maiden mother crone, which they can be so much more than that. The goddess can be that warrior, that protector, that thinker, the creator. There's so much more. But especially people who maybe didn't have an ideal mother figure in their life growing up, it makes it even harder to connect with a goddess figure as well. So I would say if you could have any goddess or come up with a goddess, like what would that ideal goddess be? What would she do? What qualities would she have? And that kind of thing. And just think about it, and maybe it might help you soften and open up to that idea and give you a little bit of a prep work going into our next episode where we talk more about working with them. So a little bit of homework.
I already know mine. That's how I was able to connect to my goddess way early on. If you want it, I can go ahead and tell you now, or I can tell you on the next episode.
We can talk on the next episode, and just because that's what I really want to go into and talk about, like our individual stories of how we connected and that kind of thing. So a little bit of a teaser there for people. So tune into the next one and check that out. We're talking about that. And then, of course, we're going to circle back around and pick up on some of the things that we started in some of the earlier podcasts that we want to get back to and finish up with. So we'll be covering some of those here in the future as well. So stay tuned. And until then, again, you can find us. Any questions, comments, email thewitchsource@gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, thewitchsource.com. I do have like a contact me section. You could use that as well if you can't remember the website or the email, which is basically the same thing as the website, but either way. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Leave us a podcast review. Positive reviews would be great. Like, subscribe, share, all that good jazz. Stop by the shop and say hi. Am I missing anything?
The community page.
Oh, yes.
The Witch Source Society.
Yes, the Facebook page. Yeah, you can hit us up there too. Ask questions if you have them. But yeah, I think that's everything then. I think we hit them all.
Yeah, I think that's it this time. And again, you're more likely to be able to get in touch directly with Raven. But you can find me on the Witch Source Society page. And if you wanted to message me, feel free to do so.
There you go. All right, guys, friends, girls, guys, whatever. Such a hot topic anymore.
Guys, gals, non-binary pals.
There you go. Love it. All right, then. Until next time, stay magical. We'll see you. Bye.
Bye.